Right, we are back, and this one is going to be an absolutely epic resin art video. Now, I want you all to do me a favor with this one if you can. I want you to image search the results and tell me exactly what your search results tell you, because this is as close to a real opal as I've ever seen. And I think all resin artists have got this stuff. It is so cheap. I used to get these free in boxes of resin that I used to use when I first started my channel. They normally come as little packets of freebies in stuff. Really super cheap to use, and it's pretty much all we need. And I'm going to be using some spray paint for this. I mean, you can probably use black acrylic paint or black poster paint. I mean, there are going to be other ways of doing this, but it is so easy. Oh, and some parchment paper, because we are going to be making this as a sheet form to begin with. There's lots of things you're going to be able to do with this. I can really see this taking off with resin art jewelry. Wire wrappers, I think, are going to want to try this because it's going to look absolutely stunning wire wrapped. So, small mixing cup. I'm going to make quite a big sheet because, again, I can store this away afterwards and use it whenever I need it. So I'm going to put quite a bit of mylar flakes in my pot. See, that is quite a lot, but once we've got some UV resin in there, again, this can be done with epoxy if you want to be a bit more patient. I'm going to just drizzle in some of my UV resin and I'm going to mix it in. Again, same as the glitter paper that we made in the previous video. We want this to be quite thick in consistency. So I'm just going to add it, and again, we need to make sure all of the mylar is covered. So I'm going to have to stir it for a good 5 or 10 minutes off camera, and I'll show you the consistency once it's ready. Okay, so we kind of have now a mylar paste. I mean, the colors are so intense. So what we can do now is just get all of that out onto our parchment paper in a big clump. There we have it. We can then fold over the paper, just begin to push that down, and just using a tool, again, I've said this before, credit card would work, just begin to smooth that out and flatten it down. We want it fairly thin so that the UV light can penetrate through. If you're doing this with epoxy, you won't need to worry about that. You can make it as thick as you want, but remember, we need to cut it. So I'll show you the thickness afterwards. Just going to spread that out into a decent sized sheet. But I don't want to push too hard because that's going to start to separate the mylar and we're going to have lots of gaps. See all these really nice colours coming through. And once I'm done, I'm going to give that 1 minute under the beast on one side and then 1 minute under the beast on the other. Okay, so we can now take away the lamp. What's this? So this is the beginning. This is the beginning. You can see the thickness there. It's not even 1 millimeter thick. So now comes the part where we add the black. Just put some tissue down because I don't want to spray my silicone matte black. Makes more cleaning up. So I'm just going to, again, I'm just using a black matte spray paint. Again, you could do this with a acrylic paint and then wipe off the excess, but I'm going to stick my mask on now and just give that a light spray all over. Okay, so once that's pretty much dry, I'm going to take some alcohol on some tissue and just begin to wipe over the surface and take off a lot of the black paint, but not all of it. So I'm hoping, well, I say I'm hoping, I already know because I tried this once yesterday, the black will remain in the deeper parts of the sheet of opal paper that we've just made. Again, if you're doing this with acrylic paint, you can pretty much do this straight away, but it is important to let the rest of the acrylic paint dry. So there we have a really incredible sheet of opal paper ready to use. I think I rubbed a little bit hard in the mid. Hold on. Yeah, I went a bit too far in the middle. So, but I can always spray that again and wait. So I kind of just, I can do what I want with this now. But we are going to be turning it into a really stunning resin art jewelry pendant. And I'm really liking this area here. And you can see it's got some character and some depth to it, which adds to the natural effect really, really nicely. I mean, imagine making a big enough sheet and making a coaster with this. But again, the end results are absolutely mind-blowing. I've never seen anything like it with resin before. It's phenomenal. So the next stage is a couple of ways that you can do this. You've seen me do this on the channel before, where I've made a clear cabochon, just clear UV resin or epoxy, and then bonded it to the paper and then cut around it afterwards after it's cured on. Or you can kind of mark around, score around the cabochon using something sharp to give you a rough line. It can be tricky to see that score line, but it can be done. And then you can cut it out with your scissors or snips, whatever you want to use, afterwards. So you can just see a faint score line where I can take my scissors now, carefully snip that out. And if you lose your score line, just place the sheet behind the cabochon and take your scissors and just follow it round. Again, you can heat this stuff up to make it easier to cut. So there we have it, ready to use. Now you will see that because of that, it has those craters areas. Those are areas that could easily trap bubbles, but we can always work around that. And again, don't throw away the offcuts. Keep them in a separate pot and you can use them in something else or hide them, whatever. Now I can just pop that away and use it for a different project in the future. So I've just got my jewelry cabochon mold. This channel, guys, has pretty much been built just on this one mold. Now, a lot of questions I always get is how do you keep it so clean? When you get these molds, you get this, it comes in like a plastic wrapper. I always keep the top part. So when I'm finished with it, I just do that. And then that sticks back to the mold and keeps it clean. And then I'm just using the Let's Resin Clear Hard Type UV. I'm going to just fill this oval to the top. I said to the top, but you do need to leave a little bit of the gap to compensate the thickness of the opal paper. I just popped some black card under there so it's easier to see, and it's also easier for me to see if there's any bubbles, so I can bring them to the surface and then pop them with a long nose lighter. So now comes the part where we submerge the opal paper into the resin. Now again, if I was to just place that on the top, same with, you could do this with epoxy, it's going to trap bubbles. So if we take some of the resin out and just completely cover this sheet, it's going to fill in those small craters and prevent any trap bubbles afterwards. Now I can take that, flip it over, and then I'm going to place one end in, take my stick just to hold the other end up and lower it slowly onto the surface. That will allow any air to slip out the sides, like so. And again, this will float on top of epoxy. So long as you don't push it under the surface, it will just float until the epoxy is cured. Now, because I'm using UV resin, I'm going to need to put my mirror underneath. What I'm going to do is give this a minute on the top under the lamp, and then I'm going to have to turn the mold over or even balance that on top of my light to cure it from the underside for another minute, because the light will really struggle to penetrate through that. And a word of warning, don't use too much black because the light won't be able to cure around the black and you're going to end up with uncured resin and bubbles. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so let's had a minute on both sides. Now, this lamp isn't designed to work upside down. Whoops, let's turn that off. Just be careful if you're doing this with your UV lamp. You don't want that light to be going into your eyes because it can scar and damage your vision. So just be careful. If you've got the double-sided lamp from Let's Resin, that would be ideal for this. But I think this is a much better way of doing it than flipping the mold, because if you flip the mold, again, the light's not penetrating through that paper. If you flip the mold, you're really at risk of lots of air bubbles being drawn into your resin. So I would say keep the mold this way and cure it from underneath if you can. So now what I'm going to do is take this out, but then also give it a minute. Oh no, I've got a small bubble. That shouldn't show, don't worry. And give it another minute just because of that black. I've got 2 bubbles. See how that bubble's moving? This is why we need to be careful. So I'm going to give that another cure. That's because of that black. So if I can allow those bubbles to rise back to the paper and cure them in place, they won't show. But this is why you need to be very, very careful. And that is because of that black spray paint. So I'm going to give that another minute or 2 back under the lamp. Okay, so those bubbles now, because I put it back under the lamp this way up, those bubbles raised back to the film so that the next step, they will become invisible. You can barely see them now, but you want to be able to push and poke and not see any bubbles moving to know that that is cured. And I'm happy that that is now solid. So now comes the magical part. I mean, you might like it like that, but this is where the refraction makes the magic happen. So we are going to sand this. Sand it down. But look at that. I mean, if you want it like that, that is entirely up to you. So what I'm doing now after sanding is just wiping over with some alcohol and just checking that there's no areas that I've missed with my sandpaper. Any areas that are still a little bit shiny. And with the back, there's no sticky uppy bits from the mylar flakes, which is good. So you could glue that into something. Or if you wanted to, you could add a backing layer just to smooth it off a bit, but it is smooth. There's no bits that can catch on anything. Right, so before I show this piece, I think what I'm going to do is make some other bits. I might try with white instead of black. But again, if you're worried about the bubbles and the curing, I mean, my beast of a lamp is powerful. It's just the issue with the black. So white should work better. But yeah, if you're worried about that, definitely do it with epoxy and be a little bit more patient so you haven't got that risk. But as always, massive shout out to my channel members, anyone who's bought me a coffee or a super thanks, and to all my subs. So I just had a genius idea. Instead of making a whole new sheet to do white, I can just flip this over and I'm going to use some white acrylic paint this time, and just do it on this side. So depending on what I want to do next time I use it, I've got the black effect one side and then the white effect on the other side. Genius. Right, so I ran into the same issue with the white acrylic paint. Again, I've had to really give that a blast. So definitely, if you're going to be doing this, do it with epoxy. Don't be lazy like me. But that's what it looks like unsanded. Those bubbles should become invisible in a moment. And just to show it can be done with epoxy, I'm going to make a whopper. So these are the new molds from Little Windows. Now I've not tried these before, these big ones. So I'm going to give this, I'm going to make a whopper. And the good thing about these molds is that they do come with the stencils that I can easily just draw around. Hopefully I've got enough left. Yes, I have. I'm going to make a big white opal. Yeah, so I can easily trace around, cut it out, pour my epoxy, and then just lay it on and wait for it to cure. And I'm just going to use the collab epoxy for this one. So the handy thing, Fran is a genius over at Little Windows. She puts the exact measurements of the mold, so it tells me exactly how much epoxy I need. Now these are unique new molds. They come with, you can basically build, well, the bezel's built in with the mold. It's really clever. It's like a rim there, so you overflow it into this, and it basically has a built-in bezel. I'm not going to use that today. I just want to make the huge cabochon. That's all I'm going to be doing, but I will do a separate video on these new molds soon. So you would have seen then that I cut my shape a little bit too big for the mold. So it's actually wedged in there. So it's not really showing you it floating, which it would, so long as you don't cover the back. But you just have to take my word for it. It will work. So I'm going to go and pop this on my heat mat and speed up the curing process. So I thought I'd be really nice and show you this one before sanding. It is a whopper. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. It's huge. There we go. I mean, you've got a tiny, tiny trap bubble in the middle there. But with epoxy, because I've cheated and put that on the heat mat, I don't want to go sanding that yet, because I want the whole thing to be as solid as possible before I start messing around with that, because it could ruin it. So I'm going to leave that overnight and then sand it down tomorrow. Okay, we're all done. As always, give the video a thumbs up, drop me a comment, even if it's just a smiley face. And if you haven't subbed, it is free. Hit that button for me. So let's start with the, yeah, this is the one that we did first. Now what I'm going to do at the end of the video is just put some snippets of these in different lights so you can see. And what I want you to do again is just do an image search on them. If you're watching on YouTube TV, it might be a little bit more difficult. You might have to get your phone out to screenshot it. But in different lights, trust me, these look, I mean, they look incredible as it is. But look at the way the light refracts off the surface, giving that really natural opal effect. It is incredible. Again, I've never seen a fake opal that actually does this the same as this is, if that makes sense. It's absolutely stunning. Look at those colors. So that is the one with the black spray paint. Again, epoxy, much safer method. This is the white one that I did afterwards. You see those bubbles just in there, but they're barely noticeable. I think I prefer this one to this one. I don't know. It's so difficult. They're both my favorites, but wait till you see the big one. But look at that refraction. It really is magical. I think this is probably the best. It's difficult. I think these could be the best things that I've ever made. They're definitely up there. So these two, just to show you different ways of doing it, or different shapes and different sizes. You get different hardware for this. Again, just measure the cabochons and then search for the hardware. Again, you can just see some bubbles in that one. Just don't be impatient and use epoxy instead. So the big one, the whopper. Not as much colour coming through in this light. It's mainly because the depth of the piece is much greater than these shallow ones. So it struggles in a way to bounce that light back off. But I'll show you again in different light and you'll see those colours coming through much, much better. But again, the refraction is there. It's absolutely phenomenal. Right. Hope you enjoyed that one. Again, watch the snippets at the end. I'm not going to be talking through them. It's just going to be me wandering around my studio in different light, capturing some absolutely incredible colours. I'm not going to edit it in any way. It is just in different lights. See you for the next one. Bye for now.